Hidden Figures is a biographical drama that tells the story of three African-American women that worked for NASA during the space race of the 1960s. Naturally, throughout the story, their work at NASA is crucial to getting a man both into space and eventually to the moon, but also breaking through boundaries for both women as well as African-Americans. So that's the plot of the movie, but what you really need to know is that this is a fun, funny, and inspiring story of people overcoming the societal barriers in front of them to do something bigger than themselves. And all this takes place during a bizarre time in American history where segregation's coming to an end and we're in the middle of the Cold War. And so the climate of the United States was just so strange, which creates for a very compelling story that's so easy to forget about, especially in a situation like this where their story hasn't really been told. I'm very much familiar with the story of John Glenn and the space race and John F. Kennedy and the compelling speeches, the civil rights movement, but this specific story about the role of African-American women during the space race, I've never heard that before, so this was very interesting to me, and one that I plan to read on Wikipedia to get those more specifics of how realistic the story was to the true life events. So what I really loved about this movie was the cast and the characters. They're all so likable and bring something unique to the table that makes them feel like a real person that you know. Taraji P. Henson really, I think I pronounced her name right, she plays really the main character in the story, and in it she plays very much a soft-spoken mathematician that kind of wants to keep to herself and not make a big fuss while being in an environment where a lot of people's eyes are kind of brought to her, and she gets the moments where she's really big and strong and powerful, but for the most part she's very small and restrained, which is interesting because I know her from Person of Interest where she's this big, bold, strong character, and so this was very much a change of pace, and she kind of very much encapsulates this role and lives it, and it feels so believable and real. Along those same lines, she has a lot of back and forth with Jim Parsons from The Big Bang Theory and Kevin Costner, and just kind of all of it plays together really well. I was very worried that Jim Parsons, I was just going to see his character from The Big Bang Theory. I haven't watched a ton of that show, but I've watched 2, 3, 4 seasons of it. And I thought I was just going to see him. And he kind of plays the same type of character in a certain way, except with more of a racist vibe to him. But it fits very well into the story they're telling. So Kevin Costner does a great job as the director of the Space Task Group that just absolutely believes in what they're doing and doesn't want anything, including racism, to get in the way or stop them from progressing and beating the Russians. Because he's a firm believer that what they're doing truly matters for mankind and for America. And it's just very inspiring, but really the whole cast in this is just so likable in different ways. One of the things the movie also does really well is balance the pacing of the payoff moments and the humor throughout the entire thing. And so there's just a steady stream of jokes about every 5 minutes, not too jokey, but just the right amount of humor to balance the drama of what you're seeing, followed by the second half of the movie just being a stream of payoff moments, of victories. My screening, the audience was actually like clapping out loud, giving out applause about every 10 minutes for the entire last half of the movie, because there's just so many great moments of seeing these characters overcome the obstacles in front of them. One more thing, this movie puts John Glenn in a really good light. It portrays him as so likable and charismatic and like a guy without any faults and a whole bunch of things really, really going for him. He's played by an Austin boy named Glenn Powell, so he's got the thumbs up from me. Anyway, this is a very good movie. It's not a perfect movie. It has a few issues. The one that really stuck out to me as I was watching it is that because the movie's kind of central tensions deal with racial barriers as well as gender barriers, they work that into too many of the conversations where I don't know that there actually would have been that specific tension in that environment. So if one of the lead ladies is talking with an African-American man, suddenly the tension now he's looking down on her because she's a woman. And so it does a lot of things like that that felt a little bit forced, like they just had to put that tension in every situation. And there were some environments where I just kind of thought, you know, I think you could have just had a romantic moment right there. You didn't need to put this element in that section of the movie. And maybe it was realistic, but the way it plays out in the film, it didn't feel like it really happened that way. Along those same lines, because the central tension of the story deals with gender and race, when you get into the third act of the movie, and the third act deals more about the actual launch of a ship and the space race and the mission itself, the conflict shifts to now that event, which had nothing to do with race and gender roles. It was just about a ship that had some issues to kind of go down. And so it felt a little bit out of place with what was going on. Of course, it's what actually happened. Of course, you had to deal with it. But at the same time, it didn't necessarily fit in with some of the vibe of what was going on. And the way the third act was handled was a little bit unbalanced with the three lead characters. And there seemed to be like an engineering problem going on with the ship. So we're talking with a mathematician at that moment, focusing on the mathematician. And we're focusing in on a lady that was working on computer programming and not the one that was an engineer. So there's some things like that. It felt a little bit uneven in the third act where it didn't gel together quite as well as I thought it was going to, as well as the movie very much feels, it introduces these three lead characters as really close, and then they kind of had their own separate adventures at NASA, very much focusing on the Taraji Henson's character as mathematician with Kevin Costner, and the other two feel like kind of little side stories, and at times it felt like you'd go big gaps of time without getting an update on what was going on with their story, and then suddenly we'd get a big update on what was going on with them, and then we'd go back to the main story about the mathematician. So it felt a little bit uneven and balanced in how to tell this story with these events and how to juggle all of those pieces. But overall, this was a very solid movie, very inspiring, very fun and funny, as I mentioned before. If I'm going to rate this movie, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I very much enjoyed the experience. And some of the people around me, I mean, just like I said, they were just hooting, hollering, clapping. When certain things happened, I mean, just kind of, ooh, no, you didn't. I mean, the whole deal was going on. My wife was like talking to herself the whole movie, just getting worked up with what was going on. Very much stirs the right emotions in you, pushes the right buttons at the right moment, gets you angry at the right moment, gives you the payoff. It makes you laugh. Very enjoyable film. Not perfect, a little bit unbalanced and uneven in the way it does a few things, but tells a very enjoyable story. This movie delivers on the promise of the trailer and the idea of the film as a whole. And if I'm being honest, this is the type of movie I really hope a lot of people go and see. Not just because it tells a good story that needs to be told, but this type of movie that's the mid-budget comedy drama talking about a real life event, like the movie that keeps coming to mind is Cool Runnings. You don't get a lot of movies like that, and you don't get a lot of movies like this that do all that well, so therefore they don't make a lot of them. And I want more stories like this being told because they need to be told, and they're good movies. They're enjoyable stories that are fun, funny, and they lift up your soul. So please go out and check out this movie. I highly encourage it. But I don't want to just talk about Hidden Figures. I want to talk about Hidden Figures with you. So tell me in the comment section, are you excited for this movie? Have you already seen it? Tell me what you thought below. If you're new to my channel, you've never clicked that subscribe button, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I like to talk about the daily movie news as it comes out, as well as review a couple of movies each week. Thank you for watching.